the children vital skills like numeracy and literacy. But more importantly, this is when the foundation for future learning and health is established. In these early years, children learn to express their ideas and find their voice. They develop their social skills as well as their critical thinking skills. They also develop a strong sense of self. With more and more families needing to have both parents go to work, early years professionals like me have an important responsibility to expose children to rich learning experiences. With us, they can develop and practice all of these important skills which they can put to use in the future. It is short-sighted to think about the early years as just care, or as a means of preparing children for literacy and numeracy skills only. We need to be ambitious for all children, to help them develop numeracy skills so that they can start primary school with equal potential they were born with. Without this strong foundation, some children may never catch up. This will lead to further, probably more expensive interventions being needed at a later date. It may mean teachers trying to give them extra help being taken away from the rest of the class, or those unprepared children falling further behind. We need to make sure every child has the opportunities they deserve. We're already starting to see the change that a government can make. Hundreds of thousands of working parents can now get extra help with their childcare, with 15 hours government-funded early education each week for children aged 9 months and older. The government are setting up breakfast clubs in every primary school so that children can start their day ready to learn. They're funding 300 new or expanded nurseries, which will open to the school for the next school year, and speech and language support for young children so that every child can find their voice. And they're supporting parents too in this very, very important time. With paternity leave and maternity leave being protected so working parents can spend time with their family. This government will keep going to help children like the ones that I work with and make sure every child gets the best start in life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is James.
My name is Michelle.
Hello, my name's Olwen.
The cost of living crisis really hit my family hard. Most of my family members are on prepayment energy meters, so when prices first started to increase, they often have decided whether to top up the electricity bills or gas bills, often not being able to do both.
So the cost of living crisis has affected us fairly severely, and our hope is that with these changes, it will be a lot more manageable for us, or at least the other costs, like cost of living, which has been going up, will either go down or even just remain the same and stop increasing at the rate that they are. That's all been really challenging, and it's really positive to hear that the government want to raise living standards, that they have a commitment to that.
I support the government's pledge to increase living standards, as that will provide families the ability to afford the basics again, and also to provide them with hope towards the future.
Finding affordable, suitable accommodation has been almost impossible.
I'm 27 now, and as I look towards the future, I want to get onto the property ladder to help give the security and stability that I need to help start planning for a family.
My daughter is young at the minute, she's only 5, but when she grows up I want her to be able to more easily own her own home, and it doesn't seem like that's really possible at the minute.
So I support the government in building lots and lots of new homes. There are lots of people that need stable living conditions, stable bases, people that want to buy or rent homes, depending on their situation, that aren't currently able to because of the market and because of the availability of it.
The government's plan to build 1.5 million additional homes will not only help first-time buyers, but also people to looking to move further up the ladder like myself.
Hello, I'm Billie Jean Daniels. I'm an outreach teacher at the Royal Free Hospital Children's School. I'm a mum of two girls and a proud nanny BB, and I live in North London. I was diagnosed with and treated for breast cancer just over 2 years ago. I went to see my GP about a lump that I'd found, and she referred me to have it checked out. It took weeks and weeks to find out what kind of cancer I had, how advanced it was, and to start my treatment. Waiting was torturous. It was all I could think about, and my heart goes out to anybody that has to wait. When you're told you have an aggressive, highly recurring cancer, it is terrifying, and you just want to have it removed from your body. It was a torturous wait for my two beautiful daughters, for my mum, my dad, and for my friends. And in some ways, it felt harder for them at times than it even did for me. Once I started my treatment, everything fell into place and worked brilliantly, like a well-oiled machine. So getting into the system can be a struggle, but once in, I had such amazing care at the Royal Free Hospital. So following my treatment, chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy, targeted treatment, I found it incredibly tough. I struggle both physically and with my mental health. I'm so appreciative for the fantastic support network around me, including Maggie's Cancer Charity. Thank you. Cancer feels so prevalent for me. I've lost recently family members and friends to cancer, and a younger, very lovely friend of mine in her early 30s is having treatment for recurrence. She's had to have some of her eggs frozen in an attempt to fulfill her dream of becoming a mum in the future. She's had medical menopause caused by chemotherapy. So having an awareness of so many people with cancer, and through my own life experiences, it's highlighted how vital it is that we invest in our precious and amazing NHS. I want to see an NHS where everyone who needs it gets the tests and the treatment that they need when they need it. And importantly, the support they need to cope with it and adjust back to their life after treatment. And I know that that's what Keir Starmer's government wants too. I was determined to do everything that I could do to fight. But without the NHS and the treatment that I received, I would not be here today. Modern medicine can be a lifesaver, but we need to fund it to make it happen. That's why I am thrilled to see this government prioritising ending the backlog so that people can be seen more quickly. Nobody with cancer should ever have to rely on being lucky. Thank you.
And jumped by 3 males with a knife to his throat, saying, "Do not report, otherwise you and your family are at risk." It makes you question your own vulnerability in your community, on who's looking out for each other. It makes you think that, as the wife of the victim, that you're helpless to help them. And so you have antisocial behaviour has a profound effect on those people that are experiencing it, whether it's a short-term thing or a longer term, into years maybe. I really do welcome the initiatives and the proposals that the government are bringing in around neighbourhood policing, making it the strongest neighbourhood policing that we've seen in a number of years to help support the communities, because being able to do it is really, really important, because that has a knock-on effect to even the minutest antisocial behaviour in our communities. So success for me would look like, and for the community, is that there is a higher trust and confidence in reporting, but also in the prevention of crime in the first place. But it is welcome that we see more people and more police on the beat. We as communities have a role to play, the police have a role to play, the councils, the government, everybody has a part to play in this. What I would like to see in 5 years' time is that the government has been seen as trying to get to or achieving those goals. So I'm acknowledging it's going to be a hard journey, it's going to be a challenging journey, but if the government are really, really pushing for those results, then I wish them the best of luck.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start today by thanking everyone who's shared their story. This is why I do my job, to change the lives of working people. The Prime Minister will show today how our plan for change will do just that, with an unrelenting focus on the issues that people really care about. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Pinewood Studios, where so much magic has been made over the years. Fantastic films which showcase the best of British innovation, from Star Wars to Superman. Cleaning up the mess that we've inherited feels like a job for a superhero. But this isn't fiction or fantasy. It's down to a Labour government to do the job we have done throughout history. As Clement Attlee built the hundreds of thousands of homes for heroes from the rubble of the Second World War, Nye Bevan created a national health service helping everyone based on their needs and not their ability to pay. Barbara Castle and Harold Wilson secured equal pay with women unionising in the workplace. And Tony Blair and Gordon Brown tackled child poverty and rebuilt our public services from the ground up. Now this Labour government, under Keir's leadership, must achieve the growth and the better living standards that every part of the country needs, and every person in the country desperately needs and deserves. And we're already rebuilding Britain in partnership with working people, focusing on their priorities. We know that fixing the failures of the past will be a massive challenge. But our mission-led approach to government is about tackling them head-on. We will get Britain back on its feet. We'll create the good jobs, new homes and a strong communities that are the foundation of a good life. We know how missions can drive our country forward. We've seen it before, when the last Labour government pledged to end child poverty within a generation. That commitment changed my life. I've seen firsthand and had first-hand experience of what a mission-led government can do. In the opportunities it creates, the communities it builds, and the trust that it forges between the government and the people it serves. I stand before you as Deputy Prime Minister thanks to the last mission-led Labour government, and I am proud to be part of another serving you today. Change has already begun, with a £22 billion boost to get our NHS back on its feet and tackle the waiting list. Great British Energy turbocharging the drive for clean energy. Investment in our buses and putting railways back on the path to public ownership. And new rights and protections for renters, and bold action to deliver safe and affordable housing. free breakfast clubs launched, a new generation of teachers being recruited to create opportunity for the next generation, a £12 an hour minimum wage, and our pro-worker, pro-business New Deal for working people. A New Deal that we put before Parliament within 100 days, that will raise living standards and security at work for over 10 million people. That is more action for working people in the last 5 months than the Tories managed in 14 years. And the incredible expansion planned here for Pinewood Studios mirrors the growth we want to unleash around the country. Raising living standards to heal economic and social hardship, transforming our transport system, fixing our broken housing market and delivering for safe, affordable, decent homes and the infrastructure that we desperately need. Partnering with local leaders, business and civil society to ignite good growth in our towns and cities. Labour isn't afraid to be bold, and that is what this country needs. We will deliver the most ambitious but achievable programme for a government in a generation. To create a fairer Britain, where families have more money in their pockets, fair pay for a fair day's work, good jobs and opportunity to thrive, where no one is written off or left behind, a Labour government with working people at its heart. That's our plan for change, and we're united behind it. And above all, it's a plan that shows we've listened to you and that we will continue to listen. And on that note, before I finish, I'd like to invite you to listen to Bliss. Like so many others, Bliss delivers the change we want to see every day, keeping people warm in their homes with renewable energy. Thank you for being here today, and over to you, Bliss.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bliss Cunnin, and I absolutely love my job. I'm a plumber, officially known as a low-carbon heating support engineer, installing heat pumps for Octopus Energy. Every day, I get to help regular people enjoy the benefits of cheap, renewable energy in their homes while contributing to the UK's goal of net zero. I take pride in my work, and as someone worried about our climate, I feel really good about the change I'm helping to deliver. But it's been a journey to get here. When I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I signed up to uni because that felt like the traditional route to a job, but I didn't enjoy it and couldn't see a career after study. I cut it short and decided to do what makes me happy. Becoming a plumber wasn't easy at the start. It's hard to get work if you haven't been an apprentice, and some companies don't create the opportunities for those starting out that Octopus has. But the rewards on the other side have been worth it. A couple of weeks ago, I did an install for a retired couple. It wasn't an easy job, and a bit of problem solving was required. Each day they cooked us a different lunch, which was so generous. And on the last day, I bought them flowers to say thank you. And that's what gets me out of bed each morning, is helping people. You hear a lot of stories about heat pumps, but most of them are not true. For me, it's not a competition with gas. It's just what saves on bills and what saves the planet. I'm already seeing people's attitudes changing. In just the space of a year, people are much more supportive. So, Prime Minister, my message today is to keep going with the clean energy mission. There are so many more heat pumps we can be installing, and they make such a difference to reducing our emissions. So thank you for making this agenda happen. Thanks for supporting clean technology, and thank you for supporting jobs like mine. I know we're making a real difference, and this is why I'm delighted to introduce today the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Ange, and thank you to all of our speakers, speaking so powerfully about things that really, really matter. And Bliss, that was incredible. And Bliss has never spoken in public like this, from a stage like this before in her life. I saw her about half an hour, 45 minutes ago, a little apprehensive, but you absolutely nailed it there, Bliss. Well done, and what an amazing contribution. An amazing contribution you're already making to our country, so thank you for that. And as Anne said, it is really great to be here at the iconic Pinewood Studios, the spiritual home of Britain's film industry. And, you know, the leader of the opposition thinks that if you do a couple of shifts in McDonald's, then you can become working class. So by that logic, if I keep coming back here, I could be the next James Bond. But this really is an incredible place. I'm sure you felt it when you came in. Countless Oscars produced here. An engine of growth which supports 8,000 jobs. And more than that, a beacon to the world of British creative brilliance. So I'm delighted to be here to launch our plan for change. Because this is about who we are as a nation. How do we project our values, fight for our values, show our strength in an ever more volatile world, but also to show to the British people that their country can still do great things. And to be honest, not just great things, things that they should be able to take for granted, the basic functions of the state. Take the NHS mentioned earlier, because perhaps more than any other institution, it represents the bigger us. Millions owe everything to it, and 2 of them are here. My family, of course, no difference. And I know I've said this before, but I would not be here without the NHS. It's the reason my mum was able to have children when she was first told, aged 11, that that would never happen. And that's because the NHS never gave up on her. And behind every single door in this country, there's a family with their own version of these stories. And yet here we are. The NHS, even the NHS, losing the trust of the British public. Record dissatisfaction. Unable to provide the timely care and dignity that Britain relies on. A precious contract between the state and the people, broken by public services in crisis, unable to perform their basic functions, broken by an economy that leaves millions working harder just to stand still, and broken by politicians who promised change and never delivered. Broken, but not beyond repair. Because one thing the British people do know in their bones is that this is a great nation. No matter how tough things are for their family and their community, they know that. And they're right. Because they recognise it in themselves. After all, in the last 14 years, they tightened their belts when they were told, we're all in it together. They closed ranks to defeat a deadly virus. And they never once wavered in their commitment to stand with Ukraine. And all they asked for in return was a government to meet them halfway. And there's hope in that. The hope of a government finally able to match their ambition with a credible plan for unlocking their potential. A great nation, rediscovering it can do great things. Renewing that contract with the people, delivering the change that they voted for. But that's the catch, isn't it? The purpose of this government is to make our public services and our economy work for working people. Strengthen our country in a world that increasingly preys on weakness. It's a cause that demands nothing less than the full power of government. Yet that's precisely what's broken, isn't it? As I've said a number of times, fixing the foundations is like finding damp in your wall. You can paint over it, you get the hairdryer out and dry it, all done that, hope it goes away. Or you can strip it out, rip out the plaster, and deal with the problem once and for all. But unless we fundamentally reform the way government goes about its business, unless we first change how we try to change the country, then the hairdryer is all we've got. And this is a big job. Prisons overflowing, the NHS on its knees, a £22 billion black hole in our public finances, which, to put that in context, is nearly half of what we spend on defence of our country. Now, I don't want to use that as an excuse. I expect to be judged on my ability to deal with it. And the work of change has begun. £25 billion invested in the NHS. Asylum returns up 53%. The minimum wage raised by a record amount. Stabilising the economy, fixing the foundation, clearing up the mess so we can take the country forward with our missions. Now that doesn't happen by accident. There's no investment in our public services without difficult decisions. No solution to the housing crisis without approving controversial development. And no taking our country forward without levelling with you honestly about the trade-offs we must face together. Now, the path of change is long, it's hard, there are a few thanks in the short term. But mark my words, with this plan for change, we will stick to it. Country first, party second. So in that country first spirit, we change our plan, a plan for change, a plan that does two things at the same time. First, it doubles down on our national missions, a strategy that, for all the turbulence of the world around us, has remained robust since we published it nearly 2 years ago. A strategy that will give the government and the nation, whether in calm or choppy waters, the stabilising certainty of the clear destination, guide us towards a decade of national renewal. Yes, some will say, we've heard these missions before. Where's the rabbit out the hat? In Westminster, they always say that. But I make no apologies for sticking to our plan, and no apologies for fixing the eyes of Whitehall, not on the distraction of Westminster, but on the long-term good of our country. However, to drive those missions forward in this Parliament and show our progress towards them, today we publish new milestones, measurable milestones, that will also give the British people the power to hold our feet to the fire. Because that accountability, that is part of how we shift the focus in Westminster towards long-term change. Second, our plan commits Whitehall to mission-led government, an approach to governing that won't just deliver change, but also change the nature of governing itself, fix the foundations and find new tools for the job. Make no mistake, this plan will land on desks across Whitehall with the heavy thud of a gauntlet being thrown down. A demand, given the urgency of our times, for a state that is more dynamic, more decisive, more innovative, less hostile to devolution and letting things go. Creative on the deployment of technology, harnessing its power to rethink services, rather than replicate the status quo in digital form. Artificial intelligence is particularly crucial here. An unprecedented opportunity for this country. We are strong already, and we must become stronger still. And we must also tear down the walls of Whitehall, let the nation in, a state that builds its capacity through partnership, rather than viewing itself as the only source of expertise. Because ultimately, mission-led government is a plan for the nation, a partnership. Businesses, charities, campaigners, unions, investors, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, the people of these islands, all pulling in the same direction, all focused on taking our country forward. Because at the end of the day, we all have a stake in change. We all look forward and see the same horizon. We all feel the burden of where we are as a country. The contract which must be repaired is ours. And that requires change. So this is our plan. It begins, as we set out in our manifesto, with strong foundations: economic stability, national security, border security. Those fundamentals never change, and we will never risk them. That's the argument we made and continue to make about the values of a changed Labour Party, serving the real concerns of working people. Not changing the conversation, not walking away or talking down to them. And that's not just about immigration. But, as ever, that shows the argument. Take these statistics that were published last week, which revealed with total clarity how the Tories lost control of immigration, opened the borders deliberately to cover up the extent of their economic stagnation. Zero regard for the damage to trust in politics. Absolutely unforgivable. Now, this government will reduce immigration, legal and illegal, because that is what working people want. And not just on migration itself, also the way that they want the economy to grow for them. That is absolutely the change that we promised at the election. And we're not hanging around. We're clearing the asylum backlog, processing thousands more claims than when we came to office, returns of foreign national offenders up 29%, on track for the highest overall number of returns for 6 years. That is what dealing with the problem seriously looks like. A much more meaningful deterrent than spraying taxpayers' money up the wall or the ridiculous Rwanda gimmick. And then, on those strong foundations, we rebuild Britain with our national missions, driven forward in the harsh light of accountability by the milestones for this Parliament. 1. Higher living standards in every region of the country as we target the highest sustained growth in the G7. So working people have more money in their pocket. The burden of the cost of living crisis no longer intruding on the joy of their family life. 2. Britain rebuilt with 1.5 million new homes. So the security I enjoyed when I was growing up, the base camp aspiration of home ownership, doesn't move further and further away from working class families like mine. 3. Safer streets, more police on the beat, stamping out antisocial behaviour in every community. Because nobody should feel insecure in the streets that they call home. 4. The best start in life for every child, with a record proportion of 5-year-olds starting school ready to learn. Because it's a scandal, an affront to the British value of equal respect, if we do not give every child, whatever their background, a fair chance to succeed. 5, clean power by 2030. Homegrown British energy, making our country more secure. So never again can a tyrant like Putin attack the living standards of working people. And 6, waiting lists in our NHS cut. The 18-week target from referral to treatment finally met. A symbol of the NHS back on its feet, facing the future, dignity and care restored to millions. Now, some people may say, that's pretty brave. You've seen the books now. You know how hard that NHS milestone is. Building 1.5 million homes is ambitious, perhaps a little too ambitious. And look, I'll be honest, they're right. We face an almighty challenge to hit these milestones by the end of this Parliament. Like I say, we're starting from ground zero. Waiting lists over 7 million. Housing starts and permission the lowest for a decade. 1 in 3 children not ready for school at the age of 5. And that's kids in reception who aren't starting to read. They're struggling to speak. And, you know, in fact, given our inheritance, let's say on housing starts, clearly, if we don't turbocharge house building with reform, we won't meet that milestone. And if that level of candour surprises you, then honestly, it shouldn't. After all, what is the point of setting a target that you can deliver without bold action? That's not public service. That's political cynicism. No, the job of these milestones is to take our country forward, drive reform through the public sector. It's not about making the government look good. So yes, they are risky for us. Country first, party second. Because that is something we've totally lost sight of in British politics. And to be honest, across Whitehall as well. I don't think there's a swamp to be drained here. But I do think that too many people in Whitehall are comfortable in the tepid bath of managed decline, have forgotten, to paraphrase JFK, that you choose change not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Now, I totally get that when trust in politics is so low, we must be careful about the promises we make. But across Whitehall and Westminster, that's been internalised as a don't say anything, don't try anything too ambitious, set targets that will happen anyway, like Rishi Sunak's inflation target, for example. And then they wonder why working people won't give you a pat on the back, wonder why working people no longer believe that politics can make a real difference to their lives. Our plan for change is a break, both with the unrealistic bluster of Boris Johnson, but also with the acceptance of decline that was Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. Our plan for change is the most ambitious and credible programme for government in a generation, and we embrace the risk that comes with it. Because if there was no jeopardy, if there was no resistance, no blockages or impediments for us to remove, then as sure as night follows day, that will be a sign that we're not serious about delivering change. And I will never do that. The mandate was for change, and change is what we will deliver. So to those who still need to hear it, change and reform are coming. That's what this plan means. Productivity in the public sector is 2.6% lower than this time last year. 8.5% down compared with just before the pandemic. Now, that would not be accepted in any other sector or walk of life. And I'm not going to subsidise it with ever-rising taxes on the British people. Take our neighbourhood policing guarantee as an example. That will deliver 13,000 extra neighbourhood police, visible on the beat, cracking down on antisocial behaviour, a named contactable officer in every community, a relief for millions of people scared to walk their own streets. That pledge is only made possible because we're matching investment with reform, standardising procurement, streamlining specialist capabilities like digital forensics, ending the madness of each of our 43 forces purchasing their own cars and their own uniforms. Or take our planning system, a blockage in our economy that is so big it obscures an entire future, stops this country building roads, grid connections, laboratories, train lines, warehouses, wind farms, power stations, you name it. A chokehold on the growth our country needs, suffocating the aspiration of working families. I mean, you walk around our country, you look at our infrastructure, and it is clear almost immediately that we have long freeloaded off the British genius of the past because we won't build a future. We haven't built a reservoir for over 30 years. And even the projects we do approve are fought tooth and nail and tooth until you end up with the absurd spectacle of a £100 million bat tunnel holding up the country's single biggest infrastructure project, driving up taxes and the cost of living beyond belief. And I'll tell you now, this government will not accept this nonsense anymore. We will streamline the approval process in the forthcoming planning and infrastructure bill. And driving through reform, I can announce another new target. Not just 1.5 million homes, but also 150 major infrastructure projects. A milestone that will triple the number of decisions on national infrastructure compared with the last Parliament. And just as importantly, will send a very clear message to the NIMBYs, the regulators, the blockers, the bureaucrats, the alliance of naysayers, the people who say, no, Britain can't do this. We can't get things done in our country. Well, we say to them, you no longer have the upper hand. Britain says yes. Because whether you like it or not, we are building a future for working people, making our country strong with stability, investment and reform. And we're building it with urgency because there's no time to lose. Everyone can see there's a growing impatience with traditional politics. Everyone can see how people are tired with those who fail to get the job done. Now, populism isn't the answer to Britain's challenges. Easy answers won't make our country strong. But nobody can deny that this kind of politics feeds off real concerns. In fact, that's the crux of the matter. People haven't become radical ideologues. We are still, in our values, a pragmatic nation. What people want from their politics, that hasn't changed. They want a stable economy. They want their country to be safe, their borders secure, more cash in their pockets, safer streets in their town, opportunities for their children, secure British energy in their home, and an NHS that is fit for the future. And that is why we've set these missions. Missions to make our country strong. Missions to make working people better off. missions this government will deliver. And I don't think these are unreasonable hopes. Clearly not. But nor do I underestimate how little faith there is from working people most of all, that politics can still deliver for them. And that's not unreasonable either. Because they kept to the contract, worked tirelessly for their family and their community, but the previous government never kept their side of the bargain. And that is what we must change. That is what these missions add up to. I don't want to give you the whole story about my parents all over again. But no matter how tough life was growing up, they always believed that if they worked hard, Britain would be better for their children. You can call that hope. You can call it security. You can call it aspiration. In the end, it amounts to the same thing. It's a feeling, a belief, a confidence that allowed working class families like mine to raise their eyes, to look forward and build their lives around the future. People can call that sentimental if you like, but I am convinced that if we unlock that potential, there is so much power in this country. I'm convinced that if we get these missions right, we can make our country stronger. I'm convinced that if we can show that politics can change Britain for the better, then we can face the future with confidence. A country secure in its values, determined to walk through the storm and build a new Britain with 1.5 million new homes, neighbourhood policing in every community, children starting school ready to learn, a more secure energy system, living standards raised, people better off, more cash in their pocket, more freedom to enjoy their family life, and dramatically cut waiting lists. That is my plan for change, the driving purpose of this government, and we will stay the course. We will fix the foundations, repair the damage, reform government, and rebuild Britain through the power of change. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now going to take a number of questions from the media. I'm starting with Chris Mason from the BBC. Chris.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason at BBC News. You've set out these milestones this morning. Immigration isn't one of them, but you have talked about it and it is in the document. And so people might wonder whether it's a priority or not. Thank you.
There are basics in government. One of them is security and security of our borders. And they're foundational. And they must be delivered. So immigration and control of immigration must be delivered. That is a foundational principle that any government must do. The missions then sit on top of that. They're the change that the government will then bring about. And so these are absolutely integral to our plan. They're the foundational stone of the plan, and they will be delivered. We'll bring in immigration down, both legal and illegal. But I take that as the basic security that any government must deliver, and we build the 5 missions, the plan for change on that. Thank you, Chris. Can I come to Beth, please?
Thank you.
Beth Rigby.
Sorry. Yeah, I got stuck, I'm up. Prime Minister Beth Rigby, Sky News. I want to follow up on Chris's question because I'm a bit confused. You say migration in this country under the Tories is unforgivable. You said borders are one of your top 2 priorities. You put tackling small boats into your mission promises before the election, adding it to your 5 missions. And yet on the banners behind you, there's nothing there. In the 6 milestones of measurement, there's nothing there. So you have not given the public one metric on which to measure you when it comes to migration. Is that because you fear failure, or is it because you said it was a priority to win, but actually it's not even in your top 6? Thank you.
No, Beth. The way we've constructed it is that there are foundational things that a government must do, and they are based on security. So national security is obvious, but border security is equally obvious in my view, and that's why I've said we are committed to bringing down immigration, both legal and illegal. We must stop people crossing in boats across the Channel, and we have to get to grips with the volume of regular migration we have in this country. The statistic last week was shocking. Net migration of nearly 1 million, quadrupled in just 4 short years. It is the duty of government to bring that down. It is our duty to do it, and that's why I said it out in my speech, that that is what we would do, and we will do it. The missions are then the additional things that we want the government to do, the change that we want to bring about, and that's why we set them out in our manifesto. Each of the chapters in our manifesto was an example of how we would deliver that, and the plan for change then takes them forward with measurable milestones so that the public can see whether we're making the progress that we need to make in the missions. But the foundation is still the foundational stone on which this is built, which of course includes as an integral part border security. Thank you, Beth. Robert from ITV.
Robert Peston at ITV. Prime Minister, I don't know whether your colleagues mentioned this to you, but there's actually never been a parliament in modern times when real household disposable income didn't rise. I mean, it rose the lowest on record in the last parliament, and it's currently forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility to rise the second lowest on record in this parliament, largely because you put up employers' national insurance. So what is your target for increasing real household disposable income, living standards? Because unless you put a numerical target on it, it's a meaningless milestone.
One of the worst failures of the last government was that living standards went down. People were actually worse off at the end of the government than they were at the beginning of the government. That's unforgivable. And that's what we want to turn around, to make sure people feel they're better off. There's one thing that came across in the election time and time again. If you ask people the questions on the doorsteps up and down the country, do you feel better off? There was only one answer given to that question, which was no. And that's what we intend to turn around. Stabilising the economy was an essential first step, because until you stabilise the economy, you can't build anything. On that, we then drive at living standards and drive them up. And people know when they're better off. It's one of the first things that people talk about. Of course, we'll go on. That's what the milestones are here. They all ladder up to our plan to make sure that living standards go up. But this is, I think, one of the most important people. Do people feel that they're better off? Do they feel safe? Do they feel they've got an NHS that's working for them? These are the fundamentals that I think everybody is most concerned about. Thank you very much, Robert. Chris Hope.
Chris Hope from GB News, Prime Minister. Again, sorry on secure borders. Your plan is to reduce net migration and reduce overall small boat crossings. GB News viewers will be saying simply, is that it, Prime Minister? Why can't you stop the boats and cut net migration to under 100,000? Is it because you can't or you don't want to? And just very quickly, can you afford all this with no more big tax rises?
Look, Chris, we are going to drive down migration, both legal and illegal. That will only be done with a serious plan. We had a gimmick for a number of years called Rwanda. What happened? The numbers went up. We wasted a lot of money, £700 million, removing 4 volunteers to Rwanda. It didn't work. The only way to make it work is to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade, and that's why we've invested so much in setting up the command that is needed to do that, and with the enforcement action that follows through. And as you know, there was a very significant arrest just the other week in relation to the work that we are doing. That is how you do it. That is serious. That is a government that absolutely is getting to grips with this. Same on legal migration. You invite me to put an arbitrary number on it. For 14 years, we had an arbitrary number under the previous government. They said it was a hard cap. It wasn't hard, and it wasn't a cap. The net result of their deliberate policies was that migration went up 4 times, staggering those figures of last year. So we will not be following that approach. We're going to do this in a serious way to take migration down. And I think that's what the British public want, a serious plan to ensure we've got control of our borders, not arbitrary caps, not gimmicks, because if we've learned one thing from the last 14 years, it's that they have the opposite of the desired effect. Thank you very much, Chris. Gary from Channel 4.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I'd like to follow on something that Robert Peston was asking about there, because you say people know if their income's gone up, but you're very specific in here. You're saying you want the measure used, annual average growth of household incomes, you want that measure to go up. It went up by 0.3% in the last Parliament, and it's projected by the OBR to go up by 0.5%. Do you, under your, in your government, do you give yourself a pass mark if it is 0.5%? Is that job done? And I've got to ask some of these other ones, which are slightly puzzling. On the NHS pledge, milestone, sorry. What happens to all the other ones that you backed on the NHS in the general election, like, for instance, 4-hour waiting times for A&E? And can I also ask you, make a point in this document of talking about the 1.5 million homes in England?
Gary, it's one question.
Well, it's a long document. We've come a long way.
Yeah, but I mean, we're never going to got a lot of people to get through.
You change your language here on housing and you say it's hugely ambitious. Is that because you actually think the 1.5 million is a bit of a moonshot and you're not going to get there and you're preparing the ground for that?
Well, Gary, let me take all 3 parts of your question. Firstly, on living standards, look, nobody feels they're better off under the last government. And, you know, we just tested that on the 4th of July across the entire country. One of the main conversations on every doorstep was people saying they didn't feel better off. In fact, they felt worse off. That's what we are intending to change, and that's why we've made it one of the priorities under the plan. On the second point you make about the NHS, I want to hit this absolutely on the head, because I do not accept the proposition that because you drive to deal with waiting lists, then everything else must suffer. That is part of the thinking of the last 14 years. It's part of the reason you have managed decline, because you accept that and you accept other standards can go down. I don't accept that. And that's why we're going to drive this hard on delivery. That's why we're going to drive through reform at the same time. But the very idea that the moment you say, I'm prioritising one thing, that is permission to let go everything else, is completely wrong. It's part of the wrong thinking that we've had for years in politics, and I don't accept it for 1 minute, and it is not built into our assumptions. On the 1.5 million hub, look, it is ambitious. It's huge. This hasn't been done for decades and decades. But we're going to do it. We're going to go for it. That's why we're going to take the difficult decisions. The reasons it hasn't been done is because people are too scared to take the planning decisions that were necessary. They talk the talk, but they didn't actually walk the walk. They didn't strip out the regulations that were needed, didn't get the skills in the right place. Yes, it's ambitious, and as I said candidly, it won't be met if we don't turbocharge it. But we can do this, and we're going to do this. It will be an incredible thing for so many people who need a secure roof over their head, somewhere of their own that they can own, and a massive driver of our economy. And again, I don't accept that by setting out clear priorities, somehow that's permission to either underachieve or not bother about other areas. That's part of the thinking that we intend to challenge and to change. Thank you very much, Gary. Natasha from LBC.
Prime Minister, thank you. Natasha Clark, LBC. First it was foundations, then it was missions, then it was steps, now it's milestones. Do you accept that this is quite a confusing plan for the public to understand what on earth your government is going to be all about? And obviously today you've told us that you're going to downgrade that growth aim from the highest of the G7. It's now just an aim. Clean power on 2030, it's now at least 95%. Are you watering down some of your promises after realising that government is a bit harder than you thought?
No, and the order in which you put things wasn't the order in which I announced them, because I announced the missions 2 years ago. as our 5 national missions to give a sense of purpose-driven government. And like all of the strategies I've set down since I became Labour leader before 2019, after getting through the 29 election, and then into the election of 2024, we've had a strategy, we've had a plan, and we've stuck to it. So those missions went down 2 years ago, we've stuck to them, I've just reiterated them now. We had them as our foundational documents in the manifesto. As I say, it was a chapter for each mission in the manifesto, so that's what we took to the country, that's the change that people voted for. We had 6 steps, the initial steps that we would do, which we indicated that we could do quickly after the elections, things like setting up GB Energy, which we have done, and other things we've been able to achieve, putting the money in to drive and make sure we got those 40,000 extra appointments every week. We then passed the budget to make sure we could stabilise the economy, and now we set out the milestones so that people can measure, are we making proper progress on our missions, back to what we said 2 years ago, and what will it feel like for me? Will I have more money in my pocket? Will I be able to get an appointment at the NHS when I need it? So these are, if you like, something for the public to use to hold us to account on what we say we can achieve on the missions in the first 5 years. And I'll be absolutely straight about, it is also designed to push and drive the reform that we're going to need if we're going to ensure that we bring about the change that's so desperately needed. Thank you very much. I've got Eleanor from the Eye. Eleanor.
Hello, Prime Minister. Eleanor Langford from the Eye paper. Labour previously stated that it was going to achieve 100% clean energy by 2030, but this document today only puts that at 95. Is Labour rowing back on its clean energy pledges?
No, the clean energy pledge is today exactly what it was in the election. That has always been central to our mission. It's a bit like the 1.5 million homes. It's really difficult. And when we first set it out 2 years ago and started our conversations, almost everybody we spoke to said, that's tough. But then when we developed those conversations, people said it can be done, but it can only be done if it's turbocharged. So there's no watering down, there's a doubling down on the determination to achieve it. Thank you very much. Martin from the Express.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'll have another stab at immigration. I'm still not sure what your actual plan is to tackle illegal crossings, which are up since you've become Prime Minister, the asylum bill, which is up since you became Prime Minister, and Brian Bell, Chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, said at the weekend that we should expect a norm of net migration of around 350,000 per year. Do you agree with that?
Well, the only way to tackle illegal migration effectively is to take down the gangs that are running it. They're making a huge amount of money in order to put people on boats across the channel, and we have to take them down. That's why we've set up the Border Security Command. That's why we're striking agreements with other countries. That's why I'm investing a lot of my time face-to-face with leaders to make sure that that law enforcement is coordinated and we have the collaboration. I've done this before. I was Chief Prosecutor for 5 years. We had then, in my time, to deal with terrorist gangs who were also operating across borders. We had to deal with gangs that were moving drugs and guns across borders. And we did it by collaborating and coordinating. I've never accepted, and I won't accept, and I've said this before and I'll say it every day, I've never accepted that apparently we can deal with terrorist gangs, apparently we can deal with gangs that are running guns and drugs, but apparently we can't deal with those people who are running this vile trade. I don't accept that. And I think that's the serious answer to this problem. Not a gimmick that made absolutely no difference and cost a fortune. And so that's how we have to take down the gangs that are running the trade in the first place. On the asylum costs, of course we've got to bring them down. We've got to process the claims. Because the last government didn't stop the boats and didn't process the claims. They've got record numbers of people who are stuck in the middle, having to be accommodated at the taxpayer's expense. That was a ridiculous way to run the country. We're going to change that. Thank you very much. Can I have Anna from the FT?
Hi, Anna Gross from the Financial Times. When you select six targets like this, there's obviously going to be an opportunity cost for other policy areas that aren't being targeted. None of the six milestones that you've selected here seem like levers that will actually drive growth. There's nothing on skills, on training, on transport, on driving investment into the UK. Has the government given up on prioritising economic growth? And just a second part of that, you also previously said you'd have the highest growth in the G7 by the end of this Parliament. Is that still the ambition?
Firstly, let me push back on the suggestion that none of these have got anything to do with growth. They've all got everything to do about growth. If you can't get an operation and you can't get back to work, it has a massive impact on growth. Housing Thank you very much, Anna. Ben from The Telegraph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ben Riley-Smith from The Telegraph. Can I go back to that clean energy pledge? You seem to be suggesting nothing's changed, but I've got your manifesto here. It says zero carbon electricity. That's 100% clean. Today you're saying 95% clean. So are you really arguing that voters, when they read zero carbon, should have read 5% carbon?
Well, Ben, the mission hasn't changed from the day I launched it nearly 2 years ago in terms of where we need to get to on clean energy by 2030. It's exactly the same as it always was. There's always going to be a mix, but that is the pledge that we made 2 years ago. That is the mission, and we've not changed it today. Thank you. Harry from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Harry Cole from The Sun. When Rishi Sunak unveiled his 5 pledges, you mentioned them earlier, you accused him, and I quote, of failing to tackle the big pressures the country face by picking easy targets, achievable goals. But haven't you just done exactly the same thing? This is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? There's no migration, no living standards, totally woolly targets on NHS reform. And to quote you again, where's the thud on Whitehall's desk about the 11 million working-age people who are not in work? How can that not be a mission? And while I've got you, what's your response to the poll this morning that says half of voters, including lots of people who voted for you in July, think you're doing a bad job?
Well, look, Harry, on the ambition here, 1.5 million homes is to do, if we build that, is to do, they're actually really risky for us to put them up there because that is now the measurable that we've chosen to put before the public. And look, Harry, on polls or anything else, I know what I was elected to do, which was to change the country for millions of people who desperately need change. I knew we had to do the hard yards early on, take the tough decisions early on. Anybody who's ever run a business or an organisation knows if you're going to change things, you don't identify a tough decision and say, I'll do it in a couple of years' time. You do it straight away. I'll be measured when we get to the next election by whether I've delivered on what I'm saying I'll do for the British public, and that is the plan that we set out today, the measurables that we have chosen to put out there to be measured against. And I've chosen them because I'm convinced they're the change that the country needs and people need to feel. So thank you, Harry. Aubrey at Times.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times. You talk about the need to be honest about trade-offs, but isn't it the case that by focusing the government quite narrowly on these targets, you will neglect and deprioritise other things? That could include accident and emergency, GP appointments, immigration, and violence against women and girls. So can you be honest about the trade-offs that you're making here? And to follow up on the question about the clean energy pledge, you say that it's exactly what was in the manifesto, but we've reread it, the 95% figure doesn't appear there. So can you explain to people why it can't be 100% by 2030?
Yeah, look, in terms of the trade-offs, I'd say 2 things. Firstly, I think everybody would accept that a government needs priorities. And the reason a government needs priorities is because without priorities, you don't get anything delivered. You just have a scattergun, and you don't have the focus that you need. So we have to have priorities. Now, it is inevitable that as soon as you put priorities up there, somebody will say, oh, but why didn't you include this? Why didn't you include that? And you end up back where you started, which is without priorities at all. So you have to have priorities to drive delivery. Every business knows that. Every organisation knows that. Anyone who's ever done anything in their lives knows that you need to have priorities if you're going to get things done. If you just have a generalist scattergun approach, it's the surest way of ensuring that you're not actually going to deliver anything. I do not accept that by putting priorities up there, that we're giving permission on everything else to fail. I don't accept that. I won't accept that. That is not acceptable, and it's not the way we'll do government. But this is setting out measurables for people so that they can see how we're making progress on our missions and hold us to account for those missions and to drive delivery and drive the change that we need in order to do so. In relation to the Clean Power mission, as I say, we launched this 2 years ago. The ambition, the nature, what we've said about it has been completely consistent for 2 years. As I say, the reaction at the time is it's not possible, something I didn't accept then and I don't accept now. I've got Sophie from the Daily Mirror.
Sophie Huskisson from the Daily Mirror. Prime Minister, Scotland has vowed to axe the 2-child benefit limit. Will you now reconsider your decision not to scrap it, to hit your milestones to give children the best start in life and to improve living standards?
Well, Sophie, what I can say is I'm absolutely committed to driving down and dealing with child poverty. That's what the last Labour government did to huge effect. It's why we've set up the task force to deal with this. But I don't accept that this is just one thing that needs to happen. If you're really going to tackle child poverty, you've got to look at housing, you've got to look at health, you've got to look at education, you've got to look at so many aspects of a child's life in order to take it seriously and to bring it down. So I know it's easy to think there's one silver bullet, and if you just do that one thing, that will change everything. I don't accept that, but we've got a strategy that we're working on to ensure that we do what the last Labour government did, which is to drive down child poverty. Thank you very much. I've got Harriet from the Daily Mail.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Harriet Lyne, Daily Mail. Since coming into office, you've launched 67 reviews, consultations and task forces, with even more in the pipeline. Critics say you're more interested in talking shops than tough decisions. Don't these reviews show that you simply didn't have a plan for what to do when you got into government?
No. And if you look at what we've done, there's a whole list of things that we've done already in government. I listed some of them in my conference speech in September. I haven't got time to repeat that speech here, but there were a long list of things that we've already delivered on. Setting up Great British Energy, making sure that we're doing the, already starting on the planning reform that we need, already using the money we've got to bring down the waiting lists in our hospitals. There's the Border Security Command already set up. So the delivery, there's lots and lots of stuff that's being delivered. But of course we've got to review things when we get into government. The first thing we had to do was review the books. I'm glad we did, although I didn't like what we found. We reviewed the books and found there was a £22 billion black hole. It's a good thing we did that review, because if we hadn't done that review, we wouldn't have been able to pass the budget, which is now stabilising the economy. We reviewed how many people we had in our prisons. Many more than we needed, bursting point, to a point where when I was trying to deal with the disorders, we were really struggling whether we had enough prison places. That's unforgivable. I don't care which political party anyone supports. That is totally unforgivable. We're reviewing what's going on in immigration, because the numbers that came out last week were staggering. Of course we're going to review how we're going to deal with that, because everywhere you look, the failure of the last government was much more profound and deep than even everybody thought it was on the 4th of July. So, like any business or organisation, as I say, you've got to understand what you're dealing with once you're in a position to deal with it. And that's why we are looking across the board, looking at what we've got to do, and already getting on with the change that we need. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.